welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies, the podcast that celebrates classic, cult, and current films and the people that made them, and many other aspects of pop culture. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. Our producer's Ben Shrewsbury, and our signature theme was composed by Greg Leroff. Here it's always Saturday night, and our mission is to chronicle film and pop cultural history one memory at a time. Tonight, we welcome back James Bond expert, magazine publisher, and writer Graham Rye as we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the 1965 release of the fourth James Bond film, Thunderball. In ticket sales, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, grosser of the series. We would have done this for Christmas, but I broke my wrist in two places taking my dog out for a 2 a.m. Christmas tinkle. Oh, the best laid plans of mice and men. I should have told everyone that I broke it in a tussle with Spectre. Welcome back, Graham.
Hello, Steve.
It's good to see you, man.
I'm glad to see you glad to see you're in one piece again.
Yes. I'll show people my little temporary cast. I had the main cast released last week. I think back to Christmas 65 in LA, and this was big event programming for me. We as a family would seldom go up to the Chinese theater, which of course is a classic movie house palace from the 20s. But we'd gone there the previous Christmas for Goldfinger, and of course that was huge. And then the expectation for Thunderball was just off the charts, akin to a big Marvel movie today, probably much more than a big Marvel. There's 20,000 Marvel movies. There was only one James Bond movie. And what was it like in London? What was it like where you were living?
Well, out in the outside of London, central London, in the sticks, it wasn't much different than any other day of the week. But when the premiere was held at the London Pavilion and the Rialto, it was mobbed. It was mobbed because I was up there outside hoping to get a glance of Sean Connery. But of course, unbeknownst to me and most everybody else standing outside, he never attended any of the Thunderball premieres because he'd had enough when he went to France for the Goldfinger one, and he got mobbed so much he said that's enough of that. But it was alive with people. Everybody wanted to see him really, and had to put up with Adolfo Celli and Claudine Auger as though that was putting up with something. But no, it was just a fabulous time, and it was greatly anticipated, and I couldn't get to see it as any quicker than it was way before I ever got the chance to go and see previews and that sort of thing. And then when I went to see it, I saw it at the Odeon Hammersmith, which was just outside the West End of London, and it had the largest screen of any cinema outside the West End of London. It was kind of like a premiere showcase cinema, and I sat through it twice. The first time, I'm just so completely blown away by it. Wow, I've got to watch this again because it was just see. There's two aspects of my memory of this now. You see, which is difficult in a way because when I saw it, I was a 14-year-old. Yeah. When I watched it last night again for the first time in quite a long time, actually on Blu-ray, I'm in my 75th year. So there's two different people talking about this. When I was 14, I was Bond crazy. Everything and anything. It didn't matter what it was. Bond, 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 Bond. And to sit through that the first time and see the Panavision, the fact that this was a much bigger Bond than any of the others dimension-wise, that helped it. And then I'd always been interested in underwater life anyway, by watching Hans and Lottie Hass on television. So I was up for that.
What was the name of that show?
Hans and Lottie Hass.
Was that the equivalent of our Sea Hunt?
No. It was a documentary program.
Oh.
It predated Jacques Cousteau's programs.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember. I think they were Danish. They might have been Danish. I can't remember now. But so when I see in lots of different fan groups people moaning about, oh, the underwater stuff bores me to tears, and I mean, I don't know whether these people have actually been underwater scuba diving. I've only ever done it once, but it's incredible. It's fascinating. So when you see that in a film that big on that screen, and it's so beautifully filmed, and it's for the first time. Nothing in Thunderball had ever been seen before in any other film. It was a first. And that's what was so wonderful about Bond. They always did it first, and they did it better than anybody else. And that's when all these other you know third-rate spy films came out off the back of Thunderball and such like, you know, we all went to see them and we kind of enjoyed them, but we knew that it wasn't the real thing. But it would do until the next Bond came out. But no, it was a fabulous experience because seeing it that large, Panavision, and when you see that, I mean, now last night when I watched it again, I'm getting goose pimples now. Um, when you see the plane fly over and all the aqua troopers parachute out, that's mind. I mean, even last night I thought, Christ, this is really still looks fabulous. And as they hit the water and the parachutes come off, and then suddenly, and that underwater battle, which for me went on a little bit too long last night. I'm getting old and tired, you see. It's still incredibly savage. It's very violent, and a lot of there's a lot of aspects of Thunderball. It's a wonder that some of it got through the censors at all, really. I mean, Quist's death with the sharks. Um,
It was, and also, Goldfinger's still my favorite, but Sean looks terrific in Thunderball. He is like at the apex of his manliness, his form. He just looks terrific in the part. By the time he does You Only Live Twice, he doesn't look as interested. Of course, the script for You Only Live Twice was not very interesting at all. I still say the helicopter chase in You Only Live Twice is one of the most boring action sequences I've ever seen.
it
Uh,
is, it is, but he does in that casino sequence. He looks at his absolute best. He never looked better before. He never looked better after. In that casino sequence in Thunderball, he's absolutely tip top. Uh,
Of course, this for those of you who could see this, because we're running this on YouTube and True TV Plus, this is a studio publicity shot because obviously Sean is not sitting next to Domino, and but to get the three of them in the picture, they placed them there. Let us go back in time a little bit. Let us go back to a gentleman named Kevin McClory because you and I know this story backwards, forwards, but for those of you who don't know the history of Thunderball, and I'll just jump in quickly. Ian Fleming was introduced to Kevin McClory, who was kind of a young producer. He had worked with Mike Todd on Around the World in 80 Days, and he had the ambition to do a Bond movie. But interestingly, he didn't like any of the Bond novels up until then. He felt that they just weren't cinematic, which is so ridiculous. But and I'm not quite sure if he told that to Ian Fleming to his face. He might have, but he decided they had to come up with a more cinematic story. And having done this great big feature, which was the best picture of 1956, Around the World in 80 Days, he came up with the idea. He brought in a screenwriter friend named Jack Whittingham, and working with Fleming, they came up with what originally was called Latitude 78 West, which in the background is the site where the NATO bomber goes down in the Bahamas. But it just didn't sell. And Ian Fleming was very frustrated with movie sales at that time, and he was not able to sell the series to a studio because they couldn't find an actor who would take a 7-year contract, and yet a studio would not take an actor unless he had a 7-year contract. So what happened is the project completely fell apart, and Ian took the material story-wise and decided to make it his latest James Bond novel, changing the title to Thunderball, and that became that novel. And what happened? Kevin and Jack Whittingham took Ian to court. They felt their material had been stolen, and this became the big legal case of the early 1960s. How do you see it, Graham? Do you believe that this case was partially responsible for Ian losing his life shortly thereafter?
well, I'd go as far as to say undoubtedly. Um, he wasn't a very well man anyway, and the heart problems he had, the stress and pressure it put it under. Certainly, I don't know. He would never have lived, I don't think, to be an old man because of his smoking and drinking habits. But no, this didn't help, and I have scant respect for McClory's memory because as far as I'm concerned, everything I've read, learnt, been told by various people that knew him, he was a shyster, and he wanted a slice of a very large, expensive cake, and he would do anything necessary to get it, which he did.
And he won the case. He won the film rights. That's why when you watch Thunderball today, the first producer credit is his. He actually gets the producer credit, whereas Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman get the presentation credit. Um, so he has the rights to Thunderball in 1963 or 64, whenever it was, and he starts to shop it. But nobody wanted to touch the project because Sean Connery was already attached to the Broccoli and Saltzman series. So he eventually realized that the only way to get a James Bond movie made was to team up with Cubby and Harry. And that's how we get Thunderball today. And he retained the rights, and we'll talk later about what happened with the remake, Never Say Never Again. But
Sure.
I had a chance to spend some time with Kevin. I was hired by him in '79. This goes back quite a few years. To come down to Nassau and do some research into what he could and couldn't do for a movie project, because he had already announced that he was going to do a new James Bond movie. This is in the late '70s. It was going to be called James Bond of the Secret Service. And he was working with Sean Connery, I believe. I mean, I'm not sure if he was working right away with him. Didn't they bring in, was it Len Dayton, Graham, to
Ellen Dayton, yeah.
Len Dayton? So I went down to Nassau. I remember it vividly. I came down to Nassau and driving into his compound, and that's how I would characterize Kevin's compound. I'm driving past a rusting yellow piece of metal lying in the brush next to the driveway,
Yeah,
and that was the A-bomb sled,
that's right.
uh, which is quite crazy. I mean, I just felt so. I spent about a week and a half with Kevin, and I learned a lot. He actually gave me a bunch of materials for my book, my first book, the James Bond films. Um, and of course, Thunderball went off to huge success. But let's talk a little bit about the people who make, Thunderball what it is. And I have to bring up one of my favorite directors, and that would have to be Terrence Young. Terrence had already directed Dr. No One from Russia with Love. What is your insight, Graham, into why Terrence did not direct Goldfinger? Was it a money issue?
I think so. Yeah, I think he fell out with them. Yeah, in 19 when was it 1992. I spent a week of extended lunch hours with Terence at Pinewood Studios, and some of the stuff that he told me was really, really fantastic. But some of it was very, very tall stories. One of them was that they were going to hold back Goldfinger and not release it until after Thunderball had come out, which is obviously not nonsense. But
Well, but I'll tell you one thing. Peter Hunt told me the same thing. Peter Hunt told me that the first cut of Goldfinger was
mm,
not viewed very favorably,
mm,
and Harry and Cubby were panicking a little bit. Peter could tell stories too, but not as tall as Terrence. But
yes,
Peter said that they had to do a lot of insert shots to make the continuity work in Goldfinger. Also, there was some feeling that Bond is not very active after he gets captured in Switzerland. So I don't know, that sound kind of ridiculous to take what I consider to be the greatest Bond movie of all time and put it on the shelf. It made no sense.
doesn't make a great deal of sense. But the thing about Goldfinger is that he is captive for a large percentage of the movie, which is a bit crazy, really. But then again, if you're going to follow the book, I suppose you're going to try and convert it so that it worked. Um, but I think Richard Maybaum's script was good, but it's still down to Paul Dane, I think, that who who sorted out the idea that, well, sorted out the crazy and very ridiculous idea that anybody was going to move all that gold from Fort Knox in anything like the time that they would be, allowed to do so before everybody came in to get them to put it back. So the idea of irradiating it with the atomic bomb, that was Dan's idea, and it really does work.
I,
But
I
I,
remember.
I still don't. I can't, for the life of me, honestly believe that they would have held that film with the amount of money that was spent on it back, because I just it doesn't make any kind of logical business sense to me at all.
Now, Terrence comes into the Bond series not exactly a marquee director. I mean, certainly a good working director, and had worked for Cubby and actually Cubby and Irving Allen
Mm.
previously. Done some films. In fact, did he direct No Time to Die for them? Was that the title they worked on? I can't remember now.
Oh, with Victor Mature and
Right.
Luciana. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of their early titles. Interestingly, that Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson took that title again for the last Daniel Craig. But I knew a little bit about Terrence also because during World War II, he was in the Guards Armor Division and was involved heavily in Operation Market Garden in Holland.
Yeah.
And Steve Mitchell and I just did the Blu-ray commentary on A Bridge Too Far for one of the video companies. So I got to, the character that Michael Caine plays in A
Mhm.
Bridge Too Far is essentially Terrence's boss, who was Joe Vandeler,
Mhm.
the brigade commander.
Mhm.
What is your opinion of Terrence as a director, Graham?
Hmm. Interesting question. I, I don't think he was. He was somebody I think that worked reasonably tightly with material that he was interested in, that he enjoyed. But if things got overcomplicated and too convoluted, he kind of because he kind of like walked away at the end of Thunderball because when all the pre-production was, he wasn't anywhere to be seen. When most of that was, and Peter was left to do this and left to do that. We all know the old story of blue mask, black mask, blue mask. Where the color Peter was tearing his hair out because there was nothing he could do to save that. There was no other footage that he could use. But also the footage that needed to be shot for the Disco Volante chase, there wasn't enough of that shot, so they had to use it in a frame. The frame ratio didn't work. That's why it looks all speeded up.
Oh, you mean
But
when the Disco Volante's out of control?
when it was out of control, yeah. But I mean, he wasn't around to oversee on it. That was all down to Peter, and Peter wasn't totally happy about that.
Did Terrence tell you about whether he enjoyed working on Thunderball?
Oh yeah, he loved it. He loved it. Because he loved the Bahamas. Who wouldn't do it? And he had a wonderful cast of beautiful ladies. And he and Sean got like a house on fire because they had such an alike sense of humor. In fact, and they were very close, and I think Sean Connery looked upon Terence Young very much as a father figure. In fact, when there was uh, a memorial service for him at a church in London, which I went to, everybody was more or less seated. And Sean Connery came in with his wife Michelin, and they sat because it was quite full, and he sat directly in front of me. And during that, the sermon or something like, I could see that his shoulders, he's a big man, he was trembling because he was crying. Quite obviously, he was crying because that's how he saw Terence. He was like a second father because he did enable him to take on that role. I don't think any other director could have handled him the way that Terence did, because Guy Hamilton, he, I have always seen a kind of sneering attitude from Guy Hamilton towards James Bond. He can't take it seriously or serious enough. So when he did Goldfinger, there was a bit of a it was a bit of a send up, you know. That's why Diamonds Are Forever is such a huge send up. But it, I mean, Doctor No from Russia with Love and Thunderball, we're not supposed to believe this is real life, but it still runs along a track of a reasonable amount of reality, and that's down to Terence.
Well,
And
it's
all of those funny quips and throwaway lines and such like, most of them were a joint collaboration between Terence and Sean Connery. They weren't in the script.
and they're just brilliant. And I want to talk about the thing that distinguishes Thunderball for me also. And you kind of hit it on the nail that basically it's it is a fantastic story, but it's a very real story.
Hmm.
Spectre has copped a British bomber and taken the A-bombs, something that could actually happen. And they go to Nassau, and Bond is working for a human as a human being agent, as opposed to in the next film, You Only Live Twice. He seems to be some kind of machine. You know, he's more of a he's
Yeah.
more of a guy who turns the knobs. In Thunderball, he's still very human. And I also have to say that Thunderball to me is the most romantic of all the Bond movies because I find that his relationship with Domino Claudine Auger is tender. I mean, obviously they don't have a lot of time together, but the charisma, the chemistry between the two characters is just terrific. And I have to say that casting wise, you know, they had the whole world to find a girl. I can't think of anybody more gorgeous than
Mm,
Claudine Auger.
yeah.
Thoughts? Would you agree?
Yes, but I think that they did the right thing by getting Nicky van der Zyl to revoice her because Claudine Auger's voice was very guttural and very rough. When you hear it on the footage before the post production is done in the Incredible World of James Bond, which is on one of the Blu-rays,
Right.
you can understand why it was done. But no, physically she was fantastic, and I think the fact that they melded and blended so well together in the film has a lot to do with the fact that they had a physical relationship while they were making the film.
Oh, what a surprise.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Nikki Vanderzil. Nikki Vanderzil was Peter Hunt's like fire department whenever he needed a voice. I mean, she's all over that early series. I mean, she's she's Honey and Dr. No. She's the hotel clerk and From Russia with Love. I think she's Kissy and You Only Live Twice. Obviously, she's Claudine. It's funny when I was working for Kevin, he came to LA and I met him at the Beverly Hills Hotel and we're talking in his suite and there's a knock at the door. It's Claudine O'Shea. And
Oh,
what a treat that was.
yeah.
But but I
And well,
thought, yeah.
unfortunately, she was invited to attend the 25th anniversary screening that I organised at the National Film Theatre in 1990, and then we had an after dinner thing at Oscar's Brasserie in Leicester Square. But she had a recurring back problem from time to time, and she did go to the bother, which I thought quite a lot of us were doing this. She and her husband went to Oscar's Brasserie and left me a little note explaining why because she couldn't sit down for a long period of time. So we missed having her as a guest at that event, which is a shame because I did speak to her two or three times on the telephone over the years, and also her husband, who was a lovely guy. I mean, yeah, and they're all.
Who did she marry?
I can't remember. I can't remember his name now. Peter, was it Peter Brent? It could have been that. I don't know. He was a businessman that kept her in luxury, which he
But not a
obviously.
Frenchman.
No, 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 no. But he was a lovely man. Sometimes I would be on the phone with him for 15 minutes or so before she came to the phone because we were chatting about, all kinds of things. And he was a lovely, lovely man. But no, that was an event that is so long as I can just vaguely remember it now.
Did you get any other Bond ladies to come to your 1990 event?
Yeah, Molly came, Molly Peters.
Right.
At that time in 1990, you didn't have access to people all over the world because you didn't know where they were. because every now and again, over the past few years or whatever, since I've had contact with Luciana Paluzzi, her husband Michael, he every drops in a critique every now and again. Why didn't you invite Luciana to this event in 1990? Blah blah. Simple, Michael. I didn't know where she was. It's as simple as that. But
She came out to LA. Well, she didn't. She lives in LA. She came over to a theater in let's see, it must have been August of last year, and I got to interview her on stage, and she didn't know that that Claudine had been revoiced. That was
didn't she?
something that was new to her. She was surprised, but boy, talk about a well-preserved woman. I mean,
Yes, she's
Luciana
fantastic.
looks terrific.
Fantastic. She's definitely one of a kind. And watching that again last night, that scene where she makes Bond look about that big, you know, your ego and this, when they've just been having sex in a bed. I won't say making love because it's not, it's sex. Um,
Well, her introduction in that negligee in that hotel room or whatever it is where she nails
it's
Angela.
it's supposed to be this where it has the location. It's the Saracen's Head in Beaconsfield, and it's one of the hotel rooms. Yeah. Well, I mean, you imagine watching that as a 14-year-old with a bit of a forward mind, and then I mean, when you see her in that outfit, you think, oh dear,
That's
it's
a
just
lot. That's a lot of woman.
you're telling me, yeah.
And
While you're still talking about revoicing, um, let me think. Where am I? Yeah, Molly Peters. She was revoiced by Barbara Jefford,
oh,
right? Now, um, Barbara Jefford had revoiced Daniela Bianchi as well.
really? See, I didn't. Now that's all fresh material for me.
Well,
Interesting.
I only knew about this. This is you'll find it on IMDb and places like that. But years and years ago, when I was working in a studio in the West End of London, I used to frequent the pub next door, and John Turner, who was appearing in the stage play musical Evita at that time, he was playing Juan Perón. He was married to Barbara Jefford, and he would come in there after the show was over quite regularly, and I would bump into him quite often. And of course, I knew the connection between him and Barbara Jefford. They were married. So when I got chatting to him, he said to me once, he said, "Of course, Barbara was asked by Covey Broccoli to do some revoicing on the Bonds because my ears pricked up, and I got him to explain. And he said, I always remember he explained it. Well, she revoiced the entire performance of the Italian lady that was in From Russia with Love. He didn't remember the names, and he said, "Oh, and the nurse on in the health farm." See, so obviously I knew who he was talking about. So that's how I found out that it was his wife that had revoiced them. Yeah.
Dialogue, I mean, whatever you call it, um, post-production revoicing is so clean and natural in the Bond movies. You wouldn't know that those were not their voices. I think, uh, with all due, I don't want to disparage Ursula Andress, but I think it was Peter Hunt told me that they thought that Ursula's regular voice, she sounded like a Dutch comic. But
Well, to be fair to Ursula, when you've got a face like that and a body like that, it doesn't matter how you sound, quite frankly. But when it comes to a movie, and especially when it's being American audiences, they need a voice that they can understand, which they would never have done with Adolfo Celli, because years later in the 80s, when he was in a TV series that the BBC made called The Borgias, he played the Pope. And one of the continuing letters that used to be written in to the Radio Times is, we can't understand what he's saying. I mean, half of what we just can't understand his dialogue because he was such a broad Italian. So they did the right thing by revoicing him. But the thing is that what a lot of people don't understand about revoicing, that some people tend to think they just stand there in the posting studio and go, "Da-dun, da-dun, 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 da-dun." Well, if they did, the film would look and sound bloody awful. It's a performance. Nikki was an actress. The way she revoiced those people, the cadence, the attitude, the inflection, everything. It was a performance. That's what she was giving. She was giving Ursula's performance as she saw it on the screen, watching the white ball going so that so they got the lip sync right. But it was a performance, and it was continually annoying to her and annoying to me as well, that she was never given the credit that she deserved when she was alive. When I did my first James Bond girls book, which I'm revamping for this year, by the way, hint, hint, and I put that in. I put that in that when the manuscript came back, red line, no, they wouldn't allow me to put that in the book. It's bloody stupid. Mind you, the other red line that they put in, and another hand annotated thing. When I'd written about Robert Brownjohn doing the titles for From Russia with Love and Goldfinger, they crossed it out and put in Maurice Binder's name.
Really? Even though he wasn't credited on From Russia with Love?
Well, it's because the people that were in charge in those offices didn't know fucking squat about the subject matter, which is why they have never loved me, because I know far more about the whole series than they'll ever know if they live to be 1,000.
Right, exactly. In 1982, 83, I was assigned as a publicist to a 3D science fiction film called Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, which is a little Molly Ringwald movie from
Peter
83.
Strauss.
Hmm?
Peter Strauss.
Peter Strauss,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's good. It's good fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun film. It was kind of a rip-off of Road Warrior set in another planet.
Yeah,
But
that's
the,
right.
the cinematographer was Frank Tidy. And
Mhm.
Frank Tidy was working with Robert Brownjohn on those titles for
Oh,
From Russia with Love. And he told me that the in-joke amongst the title guys was placing Ted Moore's credit for cinematography over the girl's bum.
yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Adolfo Celli, I thought, made a very good villain. Some people have disparaged him as being bland, but I thought Celli did a good job.
So do I. I don't think he's bland at all. I think pe people watch these films and they miss the subtleties because for whatever reason they just don't pick up subtleties. That wonderful sequence in that wonderful one of Ken's best sets, the Spectre Boardroom, when Murray Cash's partner is electrocuted, Clive Case's, um, and it cuts to he's just all this right, and it cuts to Largo, and he's sitting, he's just going. It means that much to him. That tells you all you need to know about him as a man, as a character. That sets up everything else that happens afterwards. So it tells you Bond's got to be careful because this bloke don't give a monkeys.
My Michael Wilson gave me all the call sheets for the first 10 Bond movies, and I think if I recall that on Doctor No, no, excuse me, on From Russia with Love, Anthony Dawson played Blofeld off camera.
Got the hands, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Now on Thunderball, who do you have on the record as playing?
It's Dawson on both occasions because Anthony Dawson was a very good and close friend of Terence's, so he would obviously get him work wherever he could do, and also to the point of when it came to screen testing the girls for the part of Patricia Fearing in Thunderball, he need he needed somebody to wear the mink glove to rub them down, and that was Anthony Dawson.
That's
I've,
a
I've got
that's
some,
a good
I've,
job to get.
I've got some stills of that'll be appearing for the first time anywhere in the book version of Thunderball that I'll be doing for the end of this year. I couldn't get it done for the anniversary year because there's just so many. When you look into when I look in my archive of Thunderball, I think, oh, my God, where do I start? I'm talking about thousands of images, and a lot of them are really, really beautiful. One of the ones that I came up with that I forgot I'd got, great shot of Claudine reacting to the stillsman, and behind her, it's on one of the sound stages, and the disco volante is behind them, and behind her is the 6'5" um, uh, publicity guy, Tom Carlyle, but to the left of him, and I'm thinking, what was she doing there on a set of Thunderball? Hmm Joanna Harwood,
Hmm.
who obviously wrote the script, wrote the original screenplay for Doctor No from Rush with Love. So what was she? Obviously now I'll never find anybody that'll be able to tell me. No, I won't. I've just remembered she's still alive. I must get a hold of her and
Oh,
send her.
when you talk to her, ask her if she'd come on my podcast. I've always wondered about her
Well,
involvement.
well, I think she would do, but she's a very, very remarkable woman. She's very. There's an interview done by. I'll send you a link to it on Irish radio, and she's not. She's in her 90s, but she's as sharp as a pin. But I can hear the same intellectuality, if that's a word, that of somebody like George Bernard Shaw. She's an Irish intellectual. So when she got put down and treated in a very offhand way by Terence, she wasn't impressed, because he, like a lot of men, probably me as well, in the 60s, was a misogynist.
Right, of
Women,
course.
women just need to know their place. But when you look into the history of Joanna Harwood and what she did on those bonds, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. That's why this interview was done with her on Irish radio, because when No Time to Die was being promoted, there was a big publicity do about, a woman's Phoebe Waller-Bridge has been involved. She's writing, blah. Nobody in the media mentioned anything about the idea. Well, hang on a second. The first two James Bond films were written by a woman, because the media don't know, because the majority of the media are as thick as an oak tree.
Well, how would you put Richard Maybaum into the running on those first two Bond films? Are you saying that Joanna completely rewrote him, or did they work as a team?
And no, she basically, Harry Saltzman. She was working for Harry Saltzman. Harry Saltzman gave her the book of Doctor No and said, right, write me a screenplay, because he couldn't go to somebody and get the money for a project unless he had a screenplay. So she wrote a first screenplay from the book, which
Oh,
then
have
which
you
then
ever,
got.
Graham? Have you ever seen that script?
Afraid not. No, no. I
Okay,
don't. I don't know. I have no idea where it is now. She may know. She may not. I don't know.
I'd be
But
curious to see the beginning of Bond. I don't know. I think we may have mentioned this in our last interview, but I was I was talking to the writer of Never Say Never Get Uncredited, who also worked on 3 Days of the Condor. What is his name?
Lorenzo.
Yeah, I was talking to Lorenzo. Lorenzo told me that he was working for the actor who had the rights to Casino Royale before anybody, and that was Gregory Ratoff.
Oh, Gregory Ratoff. Yeah.
He told me that the first idea they came up with, and he said that they were going to make James Bond a woman, and that Susan Hayward was going to play a female agent.
Oh dear, dear, dear. Well, it only goes to show that there were idiots back then, as like there are now. The idea
That's
of making James Bond. See, one of the things that's always driven me up the wall about these very limited-minded people is that there's already a character out there that could make a wonderful series of films if you get the right actress to play the part. Modesty Blaze by Peter O'Donnell. The books, the comic strips, they're absolutely fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. And why nobody's picked, well, nobody's got the, nobody's curious enough.
right,
Believe,
right.
believe me, if I had the connections and the money in the bank, I would be doing something about it, because they're super. They make great movies, and
Did,
very
did the
very
Monica,
sexy.
yeah, did the Monica Vitti movie make any money?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't
No.
think so. It was. I don't know. I mean, I've never been able to understand how they got Joseph Losey to direct it, because it's a very surreal experience watching that film. Because one moment she's done up in the black gear with the black hair, and like you expect to see in the comic strips, and then in the next moment she's blonde and and it's all it's trouble is it was the era of Batman and everybody thought, well, this is hip, Batman's hip, so we've got to do something that's wham bang crash that, which wasn't a very good idea.
Well, it
But
was
no,
kind of what they did with Matt Helm and Dean Martin. They went that kind of goofy, spoofy way, which, if you've read the Donald Hamilton books, they're terrific.
hmm,
Terrific. They completely blew that series.
no, I haven't read any of those books, but I have been told by people that have that it was it was anathema to them that somebody would have been allowed to have taken such great books and make such rubbish out of them. Or when I say rubbish, if you don't know anything about the books, it doesn't matter because they are fun films and they're just a vehicle for Dean Martin. And
Right.
I remember seeing them in a cinema at the time because again, like I said, there were stop gaps until a Bond film came out.
Right,
It,
like the Derek Flint films with
yeah,
Coburn, which were
which
a
I
lot of
think
fun.
which I think were the best. Those two Flint films were the two best of the copycats.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's talk Felix Leiter for a moment. I always thought that Rick Van Nutter was the best Felix Leiter,
Yeah,
although he doesn't have really a lot to do in the movie. He's just kind of Bond's sidekick, but I thought he was very good.
I did as well, and I think if you look at him, he's got that Clint Eastwood look about him, and I
Yes.
and I think he I don't understand why he had such a crap career because he should have gone a lot further than he did. I understand why they second played him so much in Thunderball because nobody or anybody or anything should get in the way of Sean Connery as James Bond. He's number one. He's up front. You know. Oh, watching one scene in that film last night, um, where Paul has gone missing. I remember seeing people write in various these news groups and things uh, how Bond is very offhand and treats Earl Cameron's character Pinder in an almost racist fashion. He's very clipped with it just isn't very nice to him. But what they fail to miss there is that Bond is upset, he's annoyed, and he's worried about Paula. So he hasn't got time to be nice to anybody. All he wants to do, he wants the lights off all over the island, and he wants to get there to see if he can save her, and he can't. Which is why later on he's got no compunction about putting that spear gun into Vargas. You know.
I was curious because Paula's introduced walking through the harbor area, and Bond does not introduce him to Leiter, and
Yeah, I know.
Leiter has to ask Bond, "Who is this?" And
Yeah,
that's
I
my
know.
assistant. And it's almost like, am I missing something? Did we miss like a little repartee that might?
Well, no, but obviously, I think probably that bit of script was probably written ad hoc on the day because they thought, well, hang on a second, you know, and that would be from Terence because Terence said to her when when she was in From Russia with Love, she wasn't ready to do this, she wasn't ready to do that, so he made sure that she got a role in
Thunderball.
Thunderball,
Right.
and then obviously made sure that she was labelled within the film as to who she was. One of the big mistakes that you see everywhere, again, in print, her character is listed as Paula Cat Lan, right? That mistake has come from the continuity script that's written off the film. Yeah. Well, whoever wrote that misheard and wrote Catlan. It's Caplan, Caplan for
That's
sure.
Yeah, that's what I heard and put in my book. I agree. By the
Yeah.
way, for those of you we're talking about the Paula Kaplan character played by Martine Beswick, who of course was in From Russia with Love. She played one of the Gypsy girls, or Romani girls, as it's now pronounced these days, who
Mhm.
had the cat fight, one of the great fights in the series, just in terms of just bloodthirsty. Um, let me pull up another image here for those of you who can see. Uh,
If they remade that film today, they could make it exactly as the book, which they should do because they were both naked.
yeah, although I would argue that there would be powers that be who who would probably say you can't have that done to women today, although ridiculous. Let's get the key, of course, to a lot of the movie, of course, is how well the underwater sequences were done. And as you pointed out at the beginning of our interview, they were truly spectacular. And
Well,
I
they
think
are
we have to
fantastic.
give some credit to Lamar Boren, who was
Mm.
the underwater cinematographer, and of course the Ivan Tors unit, which brought all these divers. I must confess, I knew nothing about scuba diving when I first saw this, and I really got a kind of a course in it by watching these guys, and quite fascinating. Now, from what you know with Terrence, did was Terrence directing so much the underwater, or was it more in the
No,
hands of the Ivan Tors people?
he left it up to them because it was the amount of time they had to be underwater. Um, you know, Big John McLaughlin who doubled for Adolfo Chili, which is
Right.
another thing that does jar with me because John's hair was blonde and Chili's hair was grey. So blonde Largo, grey Largo. Um, but in an interview that he did for 007 magazine with Steve Oxenrider, uh, he explains that they spent so much time underwater. When he came up at the end of it, I mean, he really was very ill. It made him very ill because when you're breathing that artificial, you know, down at depths of what were they? About must have been 40 feet at least. I mean, when I went down um, the once in Kenya, the guy that, in fact, this is extrapolating into nonsense, but it's true because this is how Bond affects people. The guy that taught me to scuba dive, Steve, I can't remember his surname now, he had been an aqua trooper in the South African forces. So he'd gone out of planes in all that gear and done that stuff at night. Right? Anyway, I said to him, well, what made you want it? He said, well, I watched this is in South Africa. He said, I watched Sea Hunt, Lloyd Bridges, and it was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. And then I saw Thunderball. I thought, right, I've got to do this. So after he'd seen Sea Hunt and Thunderball, he joined up and then trained to become an aqua trooper. And that's purely and simply because of an entertainment influence. You know, unbelievable, unbelievable. And besides, I mean, I'm always been very conscious about how fragile a person's life can be mine, and so for him to be able to give me the confidence, because I've never been a very strong swimmer, the idea of him giving me the confidence to go, you know, over the edge of the boat and down into it, and anyway, because I've been a photographer and such, I've got a good idea about distance and such like. And when I'm down at the bottom, standing on the bottom of the ocean, and all these little fish go by, and I look up at the boat, and there's the anchor line going up there, and on the surface is the little boat, and it's about that big. I thought he told me 40 feet. There's no way this is 40 feet. Anyway, so when we got up the top there, I said, "You bastard!" I said, "You lied to me, haven't you?" He said, "What do you mean?" Knowing what I meant, I said, "You said that we were going 40 feet down. That's more like 60." He said, 65 feet, actually. But if I'd have told you, you wouldn't have done it, would you? I said to him, "You're bloody right." Yeah. Yeah. It was
Uh,
fantastic, fantastic experience, though.
Lamar told me that his wife Evelyn doubled
Yeah.
Claudine at that when we first see her paddling around when Bond first catches her, where she gives him the starfish. That was Evelyn Bourne, at least underwater part.
Underwater, yeah. Yeah, there's only one sequence where you see Claudine, and she's quite obviously I don't know if you look at that again and you think, well, how is she actually propelling herself through the water? She's on some kind of I don't know, some kind of waistcoat thing, and she's being pulled through the water towards the camera.
Oh,
If you look at that, you can see that
oh,
it's
is that before they make love on Love Beach? That
that's right.
sequence?
Yeah. And the
Right.
one for years, I like everybody else because you believe what you see in print. That one famous still of Bond and Domino sitting on the big outcrop of coral with the bubbles going up. black and white still, the caption invariably said James Bond, Sean Connery, Domino, Claudine Auger. It's not. It's Frank Cousins, Connery's underwater double, and Evelyn Boran.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
In everybody's books and everybody's anything, it's all. So
By the way, I got into a lot of trouble. Not a lot of trouble, but I was criticized because I captioned a picture in my latest edition of the James Bond Encyclopedia
yeah,
that was Terrence, not Te- yeah, no, it's Ursula and Sean and the gentleman who plays Quarrel,
John Kitzmiller.
John Kismiller, and what I thought was Terrence. But it's a very unusual photo of
That's
Jack Lord. Jack
Jack
Lord
Lord
with that
wearing a big
hat.
wearing a big straw hat. Yeah,
I looked at that picture 10,000 times. I said, that can't possibly be Jack Lord. And it
it was
turns
Jack
out
Lord.
it was
It was.
Jack
It,
Lord.
it was Jack Lord. Yeah, well, listen, we're all allowed one mistake in our lifetime,
Right,
sure.
yes, yes. I'll take good credit for that one. Um, I was just going to pull up another picture. Oh, I wanted to ask you a question about Mitsuko. Now, the story goes, and this is that brief scene in the teaser where James Bond is observing the funeral, quote
Yeah.
unquote funeral, and his assistant is a French Asian, played by the actress Mitsuko. Now,
Mm.
I heard, and you probably know this, that there was some controversy about her. Did you know this?
Well, it depends what you mean by controversy,
Well,
really.
she was involved in something, some kind of scandal in real life prior to shooting. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, but I think she was, for whatever reason, like a lot of people are, and particularly quite a few women are, she was a very troubled person.
Oh,
Uh, that's which is obviously eventually she committed suicide. But I think she got mixed up with some not terribly pleasant people, and
okay. That sounds like closer to what I would heard as well.
yeah.
Um, so you watched it last night and you feel that you probably won't watch it again. The reason I go to it, this happens to me with a lot of films. I'll go to it not so much to relieve the movie, which I've seen 100 times, but to remind myself of the period I originally watched it. It's like going back in time. Like I can still remember myself sitting in the Chinese theater
Mm.
watching the opening credits to Thunderball. And kudos, by the way, to Tom Jones. I thought Tom Jones belted out a nice title
Oh,
slap.
it's a great title thing. I think it's underrated by a lot of people, and how people can debate whether the lyrics are about Largo or James Bond. It must be completely thick. Of course, it's about James Bond. Why would a film that's a James Bond film that's called Thunderball, have a lyric in a song based on a villain? Why? Why? Why?
Who comes up with that idiotic
Well,
stuff?
I don't know, but they are idiots. There's no two ways about it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. As we mentioned at the top of the show, Kevin had the rights to Thunderball, and he eventually does do the remake with Jack Schwartzman, which is called Never Say Never Again. And Never Say Never Again, from my point of view, has a delightful cast, but it doesn't have any near as effectiveness as the original Thunderball, particularly in giving the sense of international alarm. One of the things that's underplayed in describing the movie is how well they get this A-bomb, hijacking. It just comes off really, really believable. You believe that the
It
guy,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the Thunderball story in the film is pretty convoluted, but it needs to be to make sense of everything that follows on from each section, and the exactitude of putting Palazzi, the double, in that cockpit with those RAF officers, and you've already seen what that poison gas, that cyanide gas can do like that. And suddenly he kills everybody on the plane. Even at 14, that took my breath away because that was really horrible. So you obviously suddenly think somebody needs to kill this bloke. And when Largo cuts his air coat, and I'm sitting there as a 14-year-old going, right, he got exactly what he deserved. I do
Yeah.
believe I do believe in justice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But it's this convoluted story that needs to be told, which is why the film runs well, it's over 2 hours, isn't it? And it makes it believable. I mean, I can understand why some younger people, because they've been brought up on stuff that goes moves very very quickly. Uh, but they don't. You don't necessarily understand the story as well if it's slowed down and you see this, and so that the detail of those Spectre divers with a metal stake in their hand, hammering that net into position. 1 minute you've got a Vulcan bomber on the floor of the Caribbean, right, for all to see from above, whatever. They put that net over it, and then from the air, suddenly it's just another coral reef. It's really, I'm getting the goosebumps now because
Oh,
it's so cleverly done, and it shows you how feasible that was to do. Oh, and the other thing was that I had some stills that I couldn't identify. I thought, what the hell is this all about? And it was some divers in black. So I thought, oh, they've got to be spectacles, but they weren't. Holding shark fins on blocks of wood. Yeah, I thought, what's this about? Hang on, hold on. Then I got hold of somewhere else some call sheets from Thunderball, and then it tied it up together. When Leiter puts the helicopter down on the sea, and Bond says,
shoot,
"Shoot,
shoot one of those sharks.
shoot one of those. It'll keep it busy." I mean, it's the worst thing in the world you can do. Put blood in the water, they'll go crazy. Um, you can see the shark fins going around. It's these divers with them on their back. It's brilliantly done because you'd never see that. So it's the divers with the shark fin on the back, and they're swimming around the outside of the helicopter. So you think that Bond is about to go into shark infested waters. Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. You'd never guess it in
We
a
should
minute.
we should talk just at the end a little bit about John Barry's contribution because I
Oh,
thought
blind. Yeah.
John's score was marvelous. John told me that when you're filming underwater, you cannot have fast music. It just
Right.
doesn't work that way. So that's why his music under the water is a little slower tempered. Although he does pick up the pace in the big final battle.
Yeah.
But I thought John's contribution to the series has always been enormous. Even in movies which were not very good, like A View to a Kill, he would deliver great music.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Always. Yeah. But
Well,
the idea that the obviously he reacted to the bubbles coming up, so because there's a lot of staccato, and it sort of kind of follows the bubbles, and but there's this very downbeat, eerie music which gives you a sense of foreboding and unease because you know it's not natural to be underwater. Certainly not for the audience, and it wasn't me it wasn't certainly wasn't for me at 14. But when you're in that cinema and you're enveloped by all this, you are underwater. You're with them. So that music draws you in even more, and it makes you feel uneasy. And you think, what's going to happen next? And those bloody sharks keep coming every now and again.
oh
And
yeah.
some of them are really big
In fact,
tiger.
isn't there a moment? I think there is a moment in the final battle where a shark is heading for somebody, and you can see them firing some real spears at that shark.
That's right. The way I read it, because I don't think this was rehearsed at all, but the camera was on the divers, but the American actor in red has got the gun in his hand, and the Spectre guy is just by his side, and this shark's moving, and because because the guy in red isn't responding quickly enough, the guy in black goes snatches it and just goes at the shark. And if you watch, the actual spear from the gun goes straight through the top part of the shark and come out the other side.
Oh, I have to
That
watch that again.
that tiger shark was heading straight for him, and there was no way of knowing what that shark might or might not do. But you certainly don't want to get that close with its jaws open because it's a big 12-foot shark, and you're
Oh, yeah.
dead. So he did what he thought was the best thing to do, which is fire the spear gun at the shark, and off it went. And yeah, I mean, you couldn't, I mean, some of those sharks were definitely hurt and killed for
My
that film.
my
Definitely.
favorite line of dialogue in the movie is they're having In fact, I have a better shot of them. They're having this is a shot where Disco Volante has showed up, and Domino has to excuse herself from lunch, and Bond walks her down the next to the pool and says, "My dear uncooperative Domino," and she says, "How do you know that? How do you know my friends call me Domino?" And he says, without hesitating, "It's on the bracelet on your ankle." And she
Yeah,
says, "What sharp little eyes you have." And she walks away, and he says, under his breath, "Wait till you get to my teeth."
yeah, yeah.
That's just brilliant.
And again, one of the things that people can critique about Thunderball, it's all very well now. We can all stop frame and do this and freeze this. When you went to see it in 1965, nobody could. There was never any time to see a lot of these errors. But when she comes out of the water and treads on the sea spine with her right foot, and he brushes off her left foot and sucks the spine out of her left foot, that's a pretty bad continuity slip, really.
You're
But
giving
but
me that one for the first time. I didn't
Yeah,
notice.
but again, you see, when you see that in a movie house, left, right, who cares? Who's
No,
looking at her? And besides, who's looking at her foot?
no, it's like blue mask, black mask. Nobody really had time to think
I
about it. No,
know.
you're absolutely. It's so funny with the ability we have to freeze frame today. There are so many things you can do. I was watching the Errol Flynn Adventures of Robin Hood the other day,
Yeah.
which I've seen 2,000 times. And a friend of mine pointed out that when, let's see, Much, the miller's son, who's saved the king from an assassin, they find him. I think Will Scarlet finds him. He says, "Look in the deep background of that scene." And you can see a car driving through Sherwood Forest in the deep.
If you want to see a bad continuity slip, you want to watch The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Oh, I know that movie intimately. Which one are you talking about?
Well, because John Wayne goes in to the house that he's building for him and Vera Miles, wearing one, it's in black and white, but even so, wearing one color shirt with the flap down. And he comes back out and he's got a different color shirt on because it's much darker. So it has to be a different color. But I mean, it's so obvious when you see it once it's been pointed out, you know.
There's also a big continuity problem because when Jimmy Stewart is giving the students their little discussion about American civics, and they're talking about, and he asks Woody Strode's Pompey character to tell us where this is from, and it's obvious, and he says this is from the Constitution. Pompey answers correctly. Jimmy Stewart says, "No, that's from the Declaration of Independence." What?
Wrong. Pompey was right and he was wrong.
Yeah, it was crazy.
One
Anyways,
of the,
yeah.
one of the things I think that people that do these very intricate dissection of these films and pick on them so much that somebody that doesn't know any better could look at this and think, well, these people didn't know what they were doing. This is crap. It wasn't. That's how films were made. But it's the audience went in to see one of these films as a piece of entertainment, as a break from the humdrum, the this, the that, whatever it is. By the time they left the cinema, they'd walk out of the front of the cinema, they'd walk down the road, possibly to the nearest fish and chip shop, or because there wasn't pizza places around in '65, or wherever it is, have their supper, go home, go to bed, forget it. End of story. Nobody was ever meant to dissect these in a way that it's just totally out of order and it's totally unfair to the filmmakers that made them because they were brilliantly made and they're still brilliant films.
No, absolutely. And we've had a delightful time talking about Thunderball today, Graham. Thank you for joining us. 60 years is a long time.
It's sort of
Uh,
me.
it's crazy, crazy. You were 14. I was 14.
Yeah,
Are you a 51 baby?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
When's your birthday?
13th of September. I should be 75 on the 13th of this
I'm
September.
4 days older than you.
Really?
September 9th, 51.
Good Lord. You're looking pretty good on it too, then.
Thank you. We're both keeping our health. Absolutely.
Or
Anyway, you
dare I say it, keeping our end up.
keeping the exactly. You have been listening and watching Stephen J. Rubin's Saturday Night at the Movies, or just Saturday Night at the Movies. I won't take full credit for it. Our producer is Ben Shrewsbury. I'm your host, Steve Rubin. We have been having another conversation with the delightful Graham Rye, who has a marvelous magazine he publishes called James Bond 007. And you can tout your upcoming book. You're saying a new edition of the Bond Girls book?
Yeah, I'm working on a new updated edition of that with loads of new photographs that nobody's ever seen before, followed by a Timothy Dalton special, and then at the end of the year, Thunderball, which is a nightmare to produce because, like I said, my archive of images just runs into thousands.
Absolutely. You are the keeper of the flame, my friend. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you,
And
Steve.
if you like the show, please give us a thumbs up wherever you can. Tell your friends about it. You can also watch my other podcast, which is called Tales from Hollywoodland, which I co-host with Julian Schlossberg and Arthur E. Friedman. That's available where fine podcasts are found. And again, thank you, and everybody, happy belated New Year.